All right. So I am here with Marshall. Do you pronounce your last name Bircher? Do I get that
Bingo.
right?
Good job. Yeah.
Awesome. And he is here to talk about codependency. That's his thing. And yeah, I'll let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got here.
Okay. So yeah, I'm Marshall Berkshire, and my work is helping people who identify as codependents stop fixing themselves and have them learn how to actually love themselves so they can start creating things in their life that they enjoy. We do this in a process that also cultivates safety, sanity, peace, and relief in your life. Because for most people dealing with codependency have come from a history of terror, especially relationship terror, where things have not been safe, things have not been warm, things have not been reliable. And one of the biggest first major milestones for someone dealing with relationship trauma is to have a sense of safety, have a sense of relief. And so we focus a lot on that. So I got into this work because I had codependency. I was a professional people pleaser. I was big on perfectionism. I was an overachiever. I come from a family system of my father's a paranoid schizophrenic who exhibits a lot of covert narcissistic tendencies. My mother was highly codependent. My stepmother was a very traumatized individual who manifested a lot of borderline personality traits. So childhood was a very chaotic and unstable experience. And then I grew up in a culture that just amplified it because it was a narcissistically driven culture about power and obedience and authority over you and defining who you are. And if you're not that thing, you get exiled and things like that. And through a lot of pain and a lot of, I'd say, stubbornness and rebelliousness in me, I wanted to figure out if I could have a life that had some peace with it. Because I had an anxiety disorder for most of my life. I had severe panic attacks. I'd have 8 to 10 panic attacks a day in my late teens, early 20s. Life was pretty miserable. I had chronic depression, definitely complex PTSD, all that. And I've been going to therapy, did a lot of CBT, did a little DBT in there as well. A lot of these were teaching me coping mechanisms. And, I was given the addict model of codependency, which is it's an addiction. You're going to be stuck with it. You got to learn how to cope with it. And so about 2008, I was getting tired of this. I was like coming to a place where either this changes or I don't want to be around anymore. And I had 2 kids. I was married at the time. Like, this is not what I want. I don't want to leave. None of this works. And it's a lot of pain. So I decided to step outside the traditional therapeutic paradigm. And I started working with a man named Robert Wu Duan, who is a shaman out of Aspen, Colorado. And he introduced me to this idea of trauma, of Peter Levine's point of view on trauma. And we started working with it at the somatic level, doing that kind of emotional processing. And I started finding relief. There is a day, it was in May of 2008. I was watching an episode of Battlestar Galactica, and I realized that whole day I had not felt anxiety.
Oh, wow.
I had forgot to be anxious.
Wow.
And I'm like, whoa. And that was a distinct point where I felt hope that something could change, things could get better. And so I doubled down on that work. And then he invited me to start learning how to do the work he does. So he then became my mentor. And then as I grew and had my own challenges in dealing with that, got deeper and deeper into the codependent side of things. And that's where I got deep on the fawn response, which is the biogenesis of all codependency in my work. And then I learned how to deeply regulate and care for that and disengage that so I could have enough safety to actually say no, say yes, choose me. And then from there, I started building into the work of self-worth, what I call indomitable worth or innate value. So, and that's what brings us to today. So, yeah.
Awesome.
That's a little
Yeah,
bit
it's
about
a
my
really
story.
powerful story. Yeah. And I think that's what, well, I know that's what attracted me to your work online, and I'm sure what attracts everybody to your work who, ends up taking your courses and so forth is um, your embodiment of the work. And that I think is way more powerful than just the knowledge and the understanding or the coping, like you're saying, like you did the therapy, but that was predominantly CBT or DBT. And it is very much just like teaching skills of, oh, you have this symptom and this is what you can do to help manage it or, lower it. And it really doesn't get to the core.
Yeah.
and Um, and I think people who have done the work, have embodied the work, have gone to those deep places within themselves, they are much more effective in leading others. And I feel like you really lead with that. And yeah, I feel like I just want to give you all these kudos for doing
Thank you.
it. Because it's I think it's rare. I've been around a lot of helpers and healers my whole, career. And I think, and that's what's always been the thing that is missing. And I think what has led my path to kind of move outward of outside of the clinical model, even though I was able to, there's been more recent trainings on nervous system with complex PTSD and so forth. And I got on the earlier start with those things, which I thought was helpful. But also use of self is still a difficult thing to navigate. And so I think that's another awesome gem that you bring to the table.
I work to be the work for me, because there's no point in hey guys, you can heal your codependency while I'm over here people pleasing. Right. That's no integrity in that.
Yep.
There's no
Yeah.
honesty in that. There is also this is hard work, right? And it's very easy to put up this polished view of, oh, look at me, I got this. Real work isn't this destination. Oh, I've arrived and I can like sip my Mai Tai and get my fawnings and just blah blah blah, sit on the beach or something. It's a practice. So like when I'm working with my students, I'm working with clients, I'm like, that's all we're doing is practicing.
Yeah.
Because earlier this week, I got caught by a fawn response. Last week, I was dealing with a flight response towards a confrontation that I'd gone through. And my body's like, I'm like, we're going to care for you.
Yeah.
Because that's awesome. The work. In my work, we don't eliminate codependency. What we do is we add options to our skill set, because codependency in my work is a strategy. It's not a condition.
Yes.
And it's made up of people pleasing, perfectionism, fixing others and yourself, overachievement, merging with others, and then the enabling component of trying to protect people from their own choices. And we're doing these 6 core behaviors in some way in codependency in order to resource either safety, connection, or a sense of value identity, which means a sense of worth and purpose in the world. And when I started looking at codependency from this angle, it became very easy for me to understand what I needed. Oh, I'm people pleasing because I don't feel safe and I want connection. Okay. Yes. What are other options I can do to have connection and feel safe that don't involve that? And maybe saying no actually is an advance towards connection and safety, because now I'm getting clarity about how this person relates to me and whether or not they're going to be safe enough to say no to in the future. Yeah. Because I'm not going to feel safe if I can't say no. Yeah. Right. So I started playing it that way. And that's the work. That's all what I teach is like, let's try something else and let's find out what's real so we can avoid the land of codependent fantasy and deal with reality, because that's where we're going to have more of our desires fulfilled. That's where we're going to have our power. That's ultimately where we can cultivate safety and connection that matters to us. So yeah. you got to live it
Definitely.
to know it, because there's a finesse to this.
There is.
And it's an ongoing thing. So I like being real transparent about where I'm at. Like today, I'm feeling really good. I'd say I'm on a 92% safety, 8% anxiety. Yesterday, I was down in the 50s. It was a long day, lots of teaching, not feeling well. So it's like, hey guys, this is where I'm at. And then we talk about that. And then we all do it together. So
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to dive into using like the saying no as an example. So like earlier you said, how to, there's things to do to help regulate so that we feel safe to
right.
say no, right? Because when you're in a dysregulated state, no doesn't feel like an option. It feels like a threat to your safety, your life, your reality, your needs won't get met, and
Yeah.
all of that pops up. So let's use that as an example of, do you want to share some of the things that you do or teach for people that are having that visceral response
Right.
with the idea of saying no?
So the first thing I want to look at is the concept of safety, so we understand what we're actually talking about. There is no absolute safety.
Mhm.
That's
Yep.
rough. That
Yeah,
is
it
not a
is.
pleasant thing to hear.
Yep.
So if your body's like, well, screw that, rawr. Well, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
We would love 100% safety.
Mhm.
So what I teach is, let's feel safe enough to
Yeah.
take the risk. And that usually means I'm above 50% on my sense of safety.
Nice.
And if I can get up to 60, 70, then I feel like, okay, I can manage this. So that's one thing. We want to gauge our capacity and our sense of safety first. What am
Nice.
I feeling? Where am I at?
Yeah.
And then, two, I need to look at reality. Am I dealing with someone that has an established pattern, an established history of being aggressive,
Mm.
neglectful, dismissive, harmful, scary when I say no? Or am I dealing with someone I don't know that yet
Mm.
with? Or am I dealing with someone who has an established history of being warm and receptive most of the time to a no? And when they're not harmful. They're just like disappointed or something.
Mhm.
I have to gauge that first, because then I can determine what is the best route for me. Because if I'm dealing with person A, who's the person
Yeah.
with unsafe behavior, I'm going to need to resource different kinds of tools for me to say no. I may have to be like, okay, I need to have friends there. I need to have a plan
Mhm.
to remove myself from the situation physically,
Yeah.
things like that. So I got that. If I'm dealing with someone I don't know, then I need to say no immediately so I find out what it is.
Mm.
And then I'll talk about how I can care for the distress that can come up with that here in a sec. But if I'm dealing with person C, and person C is a very established person and their pattern of behavior is a safe behaving person, then my work here is to acknowledge, hey, this is scary. And we do this with all three people, but this is scary to say no right now.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to feel not scared, because we usually do that for something. Oh, I'm supposed to be strong or something. Like this isn't supposed to be a scary thing. Today it is. Right now in this moment, it is. So I bring that in. Of course, it's
Mhm.
scary. I have a history of saying no and being harmed in response to my no.
Yeah.
I wasn't allowed to have no's. I wasn't given permission. I was guilted or shamed. So we legitimize this feeling. We endorse it.
Mhm.
What that does is it lowers the risk and it raises the safety. And then we can be like, okay, what else do I need in order to feel safe enough to take this leap of saying no? And we can inquire within ourselves. We can listen to what might come up. 'Cause sometimes something comes up, sometimes nothing comes up. And we can take our time there for a moment. It's like, okay, maybe I need to just have a moment to breathe and go, all right, we're going to do it. We're going to jump. And then we jump and we do it and we run with it. So that is the common way I do it there. We pause, we acknowledge, we observe, we care for what's there. The other thing is, and this is a really deeper concept, but a profound tool for a lot of people. We put a lot of significance in a person's approval,
Yeah.
which
Yep.
means we put a lot of significance in their rejection.
Mhm. Yep.
What shifts if we remove the significance from that for just a moment? What if this no does not define anything about who you are? especially your worth.
Yeah.
So if we're taking care of safety, then we can look at worth, because that's usually the next place we go. And if the no doesn't have any bearing on on our value as a human being, no becomes pretty safe, because you're like, well, they're going to show me who they are by the way they respond to my no. And then I can make a better choice about where they belong in my life, because now their no doesn't determine anything about me. So those are ways in which we play with the struggle with no. And then regulating distress, I do like a little touch regulation, which is a light stroking of the palm on the underside of the forearm. This is a tool developed by a man named Mark Waldman, who is a neuroscientist who studies how the brain's neurology reacts to trauma and mindfulness. And he discovered this tool interrupts the pain centers in the brain and tells the amygdala to shut off. Hey, we're safe. And then helps ease the nervous system. Then you can do like the heart shelter to a little vagus nerve activators. Right hand over the heart, left hand on top, a little pressure can help real quick to bring down tension. That's one of the numerous tools out there to regulate.
Yeah.
And I don't do a lot of breath work, because a lot of my students, that's an activator for anxiety.
Yeah, that can be it can
So I'm
go
just
either way. Yeah.
Like, you can observe your breath, but do not change it if it gives you, because a lot of people are like, oh, anxiety. I'm like, yeah. So I work on those kinds of tools, something a little more physical. Orient to our environment, ground, things like that.
Yeah, grounding. Yeah.
But that can help with that. But a lot of times it's also that meaning we're giving the no. And so we strip the meaning out of it. We make the no innocuous by taking the significance out of it.
Yeah, definitely. I often talk about really working on stripping out the matter and really all outcomes, as much as possible, and being more in the experience. But yeah, so I guess that kind of leads me to a question, since, working with perfectionism, there's a lot of matter around the outcomes and how things, quote, should be, and how people want them to be, and what their mind is expecting to happen.
Yeah.
And that can be really hard to talk about, to kind of take this approach, that you teach, and which is needed and important, but a lot of people have a lot of resistance to there not being this ideal outcome that they want in their mind. And so I'm curious how you navigate that. I'm just assuming this is the problem that you come across, and how you navigate it.
Yeah, sometimes we have a high level of attachment to specific outcomes, because the specific outcome means I'm safe. It means I have value. It means I have connection. And that is a product of having to regulate other human beings that do not take responsibility for their own regulation. So we became entrained in their dysregulation. And then we're like, well, if the only thing I can control are outcomes, and that has to be a specific way so they don't react this scary other way.
Yeah.
And that's usually the genesis of perfectionism. So the way I approach it is perfectionism is an act of protection. I'm trying to protect myself from an outcome I can't control by controlling the outcome. It's a paradox.
Right. And then the anxiety just.
Right. And so we're going to care for it first. It's like, I want the outcome to be perfect because I'm scared. I'm scared of what I'll lose. I'm scared what will happen to me. I'm scared of what won't happen.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm trying to control this. And then we do just some care around that until it softens up to a little curiosity. Because curiosity is the opposite perfectionism. Yes. It's like, I wonder what else is possible here.
Yeah.
I wonder if this outcome, let's say it goes totally south on us. What shifts if we allow that outcome to be completely awful and it does not determine our worth?
Yeah.
So we are playing with value, our sense of worth, a lot in that.
Yeah.
Because when we can separate our worth from outcomes, then perfectionism collapses on itself, because it just becomes the cry for safety. And then we can care for that and build safety. So I do a lot of work on extracting our sense of worth from what I call conditions.
Mhm.
So conditions are anything that exists, conditions are things that must exist prior to an outcome happening, prior to a state of being occurring. So for me to be lovable, I have to be ABC.
Right. Yeah.
Once I'm ABC, I'm lovable, right? That's what's going on. So we actually liberate our worth from these conditions, and that dissolves this need for perfectionism, because now outcomes become a teacher of reality. They inform us about what is working and what is not, and they point us towards better success for us. So they become an ally rather than an enemy that we have to control. So it's actually a deep work in perfectionism.
Yeah.
And there's an irony in my work. My students will laugh at this one, but we actually don't talk about people pleasing and perfectionism directly. We're talking about the underlying needs.
Yeah.
And as we nurture that, they find themselves going, well, I don't care so much about the outcome being perfect. I'm curious what it's going to be. Because people pleasing, perfectionism, overachieving are symptoms, not problems. Codependency is a symptom. It's the fawn response that has to be cared for. And that is a result of the lack of safety, connection, and sense of value that we have. We got to cultivate those. And then this all starts to change for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great. And sometimes even just those, because even the word perfectionism, often when we struggle with perfectionism, there's actually an attachment to that word of of worth being in that. Well, it's like, oh, this is my struggle, but since it's something that I deem positive about me, then we develop this weird relationship, even
We
just to
develop
the
kind of
word
an
itself.
identity around it.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's hard to change when we've
can't change your identity, right?
Right, exactly.
So we move from identity to experience in my work.
That's great.
We do a lot of I am statements, and I am this, I am that. Like, I'm a coach, I'm a dad. That's part of me. Oh, now I'm attached. I want to control it. So we move from I am to I do, I went through, I felt, I experienced. And that helps us disidentify with that thing as part of who we are, so that we can get back to the experience of being ourselves and then processing what emerges out of that. So it's a long process, but
definitely.
Deep work takes time. It's usually a lifetime practice in my work.
Right. Yeah.
But
and I checked out, I was looking at your website a little bit too. I think it was back when we scheduled this and so forth. And so it seems like a lot of your courses build off of each other because of that. Is that true? Like, kind of like needing to take this introductory, like this level course before you're able to get into the advanced courses. And we
have the 8-week essentials course, which teaches you the fundamentals of the work, such as somatic regulation, practice I call ALI, which is about emotional regulation, acknowledge, legitimize, integrate, pause, acknowledge, and observe, titration, accessing reality, what it is, deconstructing fantasy, constructing reality, accessing power, self-trust. This 8-week course is that foundation. And then if that works for you, because there's so much unethical BS in this industry. So this 8-week course is a low-cost, high-exposure course. So it gives you an experience of me as a practitioner and the way I teach and what I teach, to see if it's an adequate fit, an effective fit for you as a student before you make the big leap into the codependency healing system, which is almost a year long.
Oh, wow.
It's a 35-week process that goes really deep on what I call the 8 factors of well-being. And that is what transitions us from having to use codependency to survive into moving basically into an interdependent state with ourselves and others. And then we have other work and joy, purpose, wealth, and relationships we do after that. And so, but that first course is, hey, here's a nibble. Does this work for you? Does my style work for you? Does my personality and energy work for you? Do the tools work for you? Because they don't work for everyone. There's no course in the world that does. There's no practitioner that does. So I want them to know what's best for them. And then by the end of those 8 weeks, if it's great for them, they can enroll in the larger course, and we then move into that deep work.
Yeah, I think that's great and important. Yeah, because then that increases the success of your clients if they kind of get that taste and then decide to move on, which is good for them, obviously, and it's good for you too, because then you're going to have people in your programs that are a good fit, and then things flow a lot better, which is
we
great.
reduce a lot of problems, we reduce a lot of conflicts, we improve the relationship, we enhance the outcomes. They get a better return on their investment because it is an investment, both monetarily. I'm pretty affordable. I try to keep things under $2,000 for those big ones. But I've got all sorts of hey, I realize the price of eggs is like gold right now. So we got things for that. But also time.
Yeah. Commitment.
And energy and commitment and the challenge and the risk that we take on these things. And so I like to make it as informed as possible. So I do a workshop once every 2 months called the 8 Factors That Heal Codependency Permanently workshop. It's free. And that gives you the introduction to the essentials course. You can enroll from there and then jump into the big one.
Yeah, I think that's great. My mind's going back to the nose for some reason. It's such a good example in your work. One thing that's really common for people is they feel like they need to kind of be almost like in an angry state before the no ends up coming out. So yeah, I thought that might be fun to talk about a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I call the justification trap.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that. Yeah.
Because I'm justified in saying no because now I'm angry.
Right. And I've given you so much already.
Yeah, already. I've been kind, I've been flexible, I've been nice, and now we're gonna get murky. And what that is it's allowing someone else to drive the bus. So this is kind of a blunt cake for people. So if my students are listening to this, blunt cake. That means slow down, check in with your capacity, see if there's something you can take in right now, because it can be a little confrontational. So yeah, the justification. I have to justify my no by a certain volume of violation. So it's not the first time they do it doesn't justify the no. I got a lot, I'm going to be nice. See if they get the hint. The hint. Sinuses. And then if it's not, then I just kind of like brr, right?
Yeah.
What we have to do here first is care for this tolerance we've built, because I call it undue tolerance. It's tolerance that they have not earned. It's tolerance that should not exist.
Yep.
That's a tricky term, should. It's tolerance that harms us if we promote it. It's probably a better way to put this. And what it basically means is I'm going to tolerate a person's behavior that hurts me, that violates a boundary, that's very uncomfortable for me, because I'm going to be nice and give them chances. But I'm actually not directly communicating with them about what I want and what I don't want.
Right. Mind reading is.
So I'm just hoping that they'll notice this, right? And I'm not even communicating it very well if I'm communicating it at all.
Right.
So what we have to do is acknowledge, okay, I'm giving a lot of tolerance to this because, they had a bad day, or they've got trauma in their past, or this or that. There's a million excuses people who are immature emotionally are going to come up with to justify their behaviors.
Right.
So here's what we do. We acknowledge that, and then we go, also, what is the pain? What's the pain here for me? How does this actually feel for me? And then we legitimize the pain. Yeah, this really hurts. This pain needs to become real and valid to me, because when my pain becomes real and valid to me, then I can say no quicker. And then the no can be, hey, this doesn't feel good to me. Can we do something different? Here's what feels good to me. Can we do that instead?
Yeah.
And communicate a way forward with them rather than going, no, stop. It's more like, nope, this is what's going to happen. And then if they violate the boundary again, then you're like, hey, you keep violating this, and this hurts, and this is scary to me. And the only thing I can do is step away next time. You keep doing this, I'm going to disengage.
Yeah.
So now they're getting a consequence they're choosing with their choices and actions. And then they can come into kind of a self-check of like, ooh, maybe I'm not, maybe I need to look at this and and grow up a little bit here. Because that gets us out of the justification trap, because now our no's don't need justification. Our no's have inherent authority because our pain, our boundaries, our needs and wants are innately legitimate. They don't require external justification, argument, defense, or explanation. My no is my no because I'm a sovereign being, you're a sovereign being, and we're going to find out how that works for you. But, okay, person A, I said no, and if they respect it, cool. If they don't, then we're going to have a conversation. And then a consequence.
Yeah, that's great. And it sounds like then that really touches on a lot of the work that you do around worth and worthiness, because that needs to be present in order to be able to say no, not from that angry place, but from that empowered place of I just don't like that. I just don't want that.
I don't like this. Please don't.
Right. And there doesn't need to be a justification other than honoring our preferences. And if our worth isn't in their hands, if they aren't holding the power because we're holding the power, then it's no longer scary or unsafe to say
it goes
that
way
no.
down. I mean, it still can be pretty intense, but at least my sense of worth is not on the chopping block anymore. Right. And really healing codependency, you technically don't heal it, but moving out of codependency, the hub of all my work is around one's worth. So it's an important concept because it's a different kind of concept than other people teach. I am not talking about a sense of confidence in self. I'm not talking about self-esteem. These are transactional forms of value. They're going to get you trapped. I'm talking about this really weird concept I call indomitable worth. And that means it's immutable, invulnerable, and innate. It cannot be added to. It cannot be changed. Can be taken from. You can't change it. No one else can change it. Nobody has authority over defining it, including yourself. It's ever present, and it's part of what you are made of. In my work, the only thing we do with worth is tune our awareness into it, and then we learn how to hear it, trust it, embody, and then express it. Because that's where we find our true self. That's where we find our voice, our intuitions, our guidance, our real boundaries, our real desires, our real purposes. And it's once we're doing that work, everything else around codependency collapses because now we don't need other people to define our value for us because we have it. And two, we can more effectively resource safe connection because we're choosing people who value who we are and we value who they are rather than going, well, it's better than nothing. I'm just going to keep this. So it's a really crucial concept and then practice to integrate into one's life because it will end codependency very, very quickly.
Definitely. This because it takes away earned worth.
Transactional value goes out the door. Boundaries and sovereignty become very apparent because you're like, I am made of worth. You are made of worth. And now our work is about understanding consent, privilege, and compatibility. It's not about, oh, you have something I want that from you. Now I'm going to try to force something or try to be nice and earn it in some way or stuff like that. It's more like I can ask. And if I get a no, then I can respect and care about that. If I get a yes, I can respect and care about that. Because we're moving towards real communion and care for each other rather than this transactional dynamic we live in right now with a lot of our relationships.
It's definitely paramount in most relationships, and it's a hard habit to move out of.
Getting out of a sense of entitlement and obligation is a very challenging part of the work. It's also where we grow up, because I'll mince words on it. We grow out of our child self into our adult self going, this isn't my mother or my father. I'm not entitled to this. I get to ask. And then when we have built enough practice and experience in this, we experience real connection because we realize this person wants to contribute these things to us. We want to contribute it to them. So the risk of not getting our needs met doesn't exist. It's that, I can connect with people who value me. I value them. And through a free exchange, we're able to nurture each other and navigate the times when they're not available and when we're not available with love and care So you don't end up feeling used or like an object. And instead, we're seen and valued in all areas of our life. That's best, we're always improving this. This is a big, deep work of connection.
Yeah.
But we're building a secure bond, secure attachment by moving towards each other this way. So
definitely. Do you talk about trust in your work, and what does that look like? Yeah, I would guess so.
Yeah, there's two types of trust we work with. The first trust is self-trust. And I learned the hard way, and I realized this 2 years ago, actually. Not a lot of people talk about self-trust. They mention the word trust yourself, and then they go on to something else.
They don't actually dive into what that actually means.
Just trust it. I'm like, what does that mean? So I took a year of exploring trust with myself, and I found 3 elements that I needed to create a sense of trust in myself. So what is a sense of self? What is self-trust? It's the ability to, it's a high level of confidence in my own legitimacy and my ability to choose and act in ways that will promote my own well-being and happiness. That's it. And it depends on 3 elements. The first element is called innate legitimacy. What innate legitimacy says is what I feel is innately real and valid. What I sense is innately real and valid. What I need and want is innately real and valid. What I have experienced is innately real and valid. The reason we start there is because in narcissistic abuse systems, the thing the abuse system has to do is introduce doubt into your worth and doubt into your perception of reality. And when they can do that, they can control you.
Yeah.
So this legitimacy is the counteraction against that. We start to heal the impact of gaslighting and of shaming and stuff like that. Because now if I have innate legitimacy, my feelings are innately legitimate, my experience is innately legitimate, then I can communicate them, I can stand up for them, and I don't have to argue that they should be valued. They are by me. And if someone else doesn't value them, now I know where they belong in my life. So we start with that one. Second component is what's called natural completeness. So natural completeness is this idea that I'm born whole, but we're not talking about wholeness the way a lot of people talk about wholeness. I'm talking about the way I am structured and built is whole. So like a square is whole unto itself. A triangle is whole unto itself. A circle is. So they're different, but they function towards their design. So I have my limits, my capacities, my struggles, my strengths, all of these are part of my wholeness. And in that wholeness is my innate value, my indomitable worth. So we build trust in our wholeness, and then we build what's called congruence. The congruence is one of the most powerful and yet often not liked aspects of what I teach because it means accountability for our choices and actions.
Yeah.
So congruence is about the alignment between intent and outcome, worth and outcome, and reality and outcome. We have to make decisions based on these. It's the reality I'm facing going, hey, I'm in this important relationship with a person that keep treating me bad, but I love them deeply. And I keep staying in it, hoping they'll change. I'm incongruent with reality.
Yes.
Which means I'm incongruent with my worth.
Yes.
And it's incongruent with my intent to have a healthy, loving relationship, right?
Yep.
So now I need to adjust my choices by going, this relationship's not working. I need to leave it so I can come back into congruence or alignment with my intent, my value, and reality. So congruence at first can be very challenging, but it's your liberator and it creates the things long-term you're looking for. So that's self-trust. We can do and practice these things. We trust ourselves. And then we have what's called operational interdependent trust. And I use a modified version of Brene Brown's Braving model for that, because it's about boundary, respect, accountability, reliability, integrity, acceptance, privacy. I had empathy and positive warm regard. When people are doing these as a behavior and they're just doing it in their own nature, and it's not like I'm sitting down and like, I like you. It's cool. I like our second date. I want to talk about what I value in trust. I value reliability. We don't do that. Because now you're telling the person how to deceive you.
Oh, interesting. I didn't think about it that way.
Right? Because they may, then I'll be the person you want, but that's not the person they are.
Right. Yeah.
right?
And it also, that's like an intellectual way about it, which it can be a form of protection instead
Yeah.
of a heart,
An
heart
embodiment of
centered.
this
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we're doing is we're observing how we're showing up with these traits. How am I being reliable? How am I being accountable? How am I showing integrity to myself and to the agreements I make? Am I being positively warm towards myself? Am I giving myself generosity?
Hmm.
Am I coming in from integrity? Do I respect my own boundaries and other people's boundaries?
Yeah.
We're looking at behavior patterns. And then I'm looking at behavior patterns in the other person. And as I witness these behavior patterns, then I can hey, I want to build trust with this person. And I can by sharing vulnerable things and seeing how they protect and care for it, which builds intimacy.
Yeah.
But they're demonstrating that they respect my boundaries because I said no on the thing. And I said, okay, sure. And they never pushed against it or asked 5 minutes later, could we change this boundary or try to, some weird pressure tactic. No, they're like, okay, I get that. And it's a consistent thing over time.
Yeah.
So in my work, trust is built, trust
Yep.
is earned by these patterns of behavior that they naturally exhibit. So if they're not demonstrating these things out of the get-go, it's done. I call them the 8 relationship bare minimums for a reason. If they don't show up with these things, leave, be done.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to get better without an immense amount of conflict and pain. And probably statistically, it won't get better anyway, because they don't care to improve it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm very just blunt with this stuff because
I think that's great.
work with
Yeah.
it all day. But that's the minimum. It's like most of us, we're coming from codependency. We live in the gap. We live in the hole of relationship. Like they treated me nice on Tuesday 3 months ago. We maximize these things called positive anomalies while ignoring all the really common things that are really hurtful to us. That is not where we want to be. We want to be at that bare minimum, which for coming out of that hole feels like the peak. Like, wow, someone could treat me with respect. That's like a peak experience. I'm like, that's your foundation. And then play, intimacy, support, and companionship, which build on top of that. So those are my angles and how I work with trust in my work.
Definitely. I think that's awesome. And yeah, it all goes back to that, like that self-trust piece. That's something I talk about a lot too, because at the end of the day, if we know that we hold the power and we call the shots and we set the boundaries, you don't necessarily have to put yourself out on this huge ledge, because once it's been violated, once a line has been crossed, if you ultimately trust yourself, then you're going to follow through with the consequence that you have laid out and so forth. And so really cultivating all of that is where kind of where it starts and where it ultimately comes back to it at the end as well.
When we trust that we have the right to power, we have the right to occupy space, we have the right to not care and the right to say no. Then it's like, well, because relationship isn't an entitlement. Relationship is fundamentally a privilege.
Yeah.
And when we treat relationship that way, we treat them as a privilege, and then we are looking to see if we are treated as a privilege. And that's where this deep respect and care can be really cultivated. Because now it's not like I'm in a relationship to get a thing. Well, to a point we all are. But if that's not encapsulated in love and warmth and respect, then it becomes transactional, it becomes toxic. But if we approach the person as you're a human being and I want to share things with you, and I would hope you want to share things with me, and we can cultivate that connection, then these exchanges we do become forms of connection and experience together where we feel seen, valued, loved, protected, because we deserve that. And that can only be built on a premise of true self-respect of our own value, trust of ourself, and then utilization of our power in a way that is aligned with what we desire.
I love it. Yeah. It's really powerful stuff. I do want to ask if Sue, since you're here, if you have any questions, if you want to ask any, go ahead.
No, I think you covered it. You covered it really well.
Yeah, very, very
More questions to
cohesive.
myself, but No, it was really good. Thank you for that, Marshall.
Okay. You're
Nice
welcome.
presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So yeah, do you have, 'cause I also want to be mindful of your time. What do you think there's any important aspects that I mean, I know obviously the work is like lifelong and so forth, but curious if there was any big foundational pieces that we didn't touch on that you think would be important to touch on.
One I want to reinforce is the legitimacy component, because people that deal with codependency do not feel real.
Yeah.
They don't feel like they exist. They only feel like they exist if they're in a relationship or if someone sees them. And they don't feel like their emotions are legitimate unless someone says they're legitimate. So they don't have this internal resource of I'm real and valued and this matters. So I'll reinforce this idea that we have this intrinsic legitimacy. And I like to do this in a very gentle way. And the way I start my students out on with legitimacy is a little what shifts question. What shifts if I trust just a bit that my feelings and my lived experiences are real, period. And that gives us a chance to access them and connect with them and start to know them. Because when we can go there, then real healing can start to happen, because that's where the work is. We can't get there we can't get here from there without it. It's the bridge. It's that innate legitimacy of our lived experiences and our emotions.
I have a question for you. So when you began teaching this stuff, how do you navigate when people bring those behaviors into relationship with you as the guide, as the teacher? They're looking for you to, give them that validation, or they're people pleasing to you to get the results. And so I don't know if you wanted to touch on that at all.
When this arrives, we bring it into love. I'm like, hey, I see you're feeling like a need for some validation, right? And I am a fan of co-regulating this. So I'm like, I see it. It's valid to me. Now I ask you to lean in and say, hey, watch this if I believe this for myself. So they can have both the container that, okay, someone can hold this for me for a moment, and now I can explore it too. Because a lot of people are like, okay, well, now you got to believe yourself. But there is this gap that feels cold. It can feel harsh. And I'm more like, let's bring it in. Let's care about it together. Because we are interdependent. And sometimes you need an external view to say, hey, you got this. But the next step is you believing it for yourself too, so that you can take it outside of yourself, bring it in, and then play with it a little bit. Hair with it a little bit. That's where I'm start them. And then we get down the road and they bring it to me again. How, Marshall, but is this right? I'm like, what do you feel? And they're like, well, I think it's right. And then let's do it. It's right. Let's run with it. So they feel this practice of endorsement. That's what I do with my kiddos. They'll send me a Snapchat and I'm like, Dad, this thing. And I'm like, yeah, what do you feel about it? Oh, I feel about this, Dad. And I'm like, okay, that makes total sense to me too. So what's it like if you trust that a little more? He's like, oh, I like this, Dad. I'm going to do okay. I got their back. But they also have to learn I can rely on myself too. It's not either or, it's always a both and. So that's how I work with it.
Because a lot of people are often looking for, well, I've noticed, people know the answers. And, I think the more you do this work and how intuitive and connected you are, you can feel like when a client is like, there's this option and there's this option, it's very clear to me what they want. Like, I'm like, you already know the answer, but there's that lack of trust and a lot of resistance and lack of permission of self and, all of the things to kind of move forward, and some of just that nudging of like, I heard the what you actually want. And
and I like to use what shifts questions. It's such a great tool because what it does is it gives it back to them in a way that's empowering. So what shifts if you trust your point of view a little more?
Yeah.
What changes for you in that? And then they're able to go, oh, I can do that too. But they feel safe enough to come in and then explain and share with me. Because this is a lot like a parent-child interaction.
Yeah.
And this is what a lot of human beings do anyway.
Yeah.
We go out and adventure in the world, we come back to a safe haven, share what happened, and then go back and do it again. That's what we're doing. I do it with my therapists. I do it with my girlfriend. I do it with my kids. I do it with myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then my students do it with me. So
Cool.
that's how we build that.
Yeah. So how, if people would like to, and you do only coursework, is that correct?
Correct. I don't do any
Okay.
one-on-one work anymore.
Okay, that's what I thought. So how would people, if they were interested in signing up for your courses, how do they find you? And I know you have a podcast, kind of
I
share how they can
do.
connect with you and everything.
So
Yeah.
I make it extremely complex and difficult to find me.
I know.
Why not? Right now, you can find, all you have to do is Google Heal Your Codependency. I'll pop up.
Awesome.
So my podcast is Heal Your Codependency with Marshall Bircher. My YouTube channels, Heal Your Codependency with Marshall Bircher. My Instagram's Heal Your Codependency. My Facebook is Heal Your Codependency. My Facebook group is Heal Your Codependency with Marshall Bircher. Yeah. A TikTok's Heal Your Codependency. I mean, it's yeah. So
yeah,
that's
you got the branding down really well. So there's
the website is healyourcodependency.com. So you can go straight there, and then you can interact with me either in the Facebook group. You can join my free workshop, the 8 Factors That Heal Codependency Permanently. It gives you the roadmap for your healing. And then the essential codependency healing trainings I teach every 8 to 9 weeks. So that thing's ongoing. You can join that, get a deep dive into the work, and then find out if you want to join the big system, the codependency healing system, which is the year-long process. Now, anything, I just say this because I'm different than a lot of coaches, but anytime someone enrolls in something with me, you get it forever, and you can always attend it over and over as long as you want.
Oh, cool.
I am not gotta buy it again to attend again, because this isn't like, I'm not teaching you how to make money.
Mm-hmm.
If I was, I would absolutely do that because you're making money.
Yeah.
That's not what's happening here.
Yeah.
And so this is about a life work, and it's about impact and reality. So you buy it once, you got it forever, and then you can attend the live classes at any time that they're running. And there's a lot of different, like I've got a membership that's coming out that'll gives options.
Yeah. I've seen you
like
talk a little bit about that. Yeah.
But that's how you find me, healyourcodependency.com, and you can sign up there. And I got a tools library that's free. You can go through the tools. I offer a lot of stuff for free because this is human work. It's not teaching you how to make $1 million. It's more like real stuff. And I mean, when I started this work, at one point I was homeless. I was living off 3-day-old cinnamon buns in my car. Life was very, very scary.
Yeah.
I needed that assistance, and there was a generosity of people that helped me move through that.
That's awesome.
And a lot of my students have been in that place, and a lot of them, the new ones, will be in some of that place. So I'm like, hey, here's things that work. It's free, accessible. You can get right to work on your healing there. So
yeah, I think that's awesome. Yeah, I like how you're different from most of the coaches out there. It's very evident, and that your heart, is really in the work, and that you're giving back. And I think the other great thing about, not having an end point on after you purchase, a course is, as we evolve and we come back to material, a year later, 5 years later, whatever that is, it always hits different. And I always think there's value each time you go through something, because you've changed, and it's
you've
like,
evolved.
it's like, oh wait, I think I missed that, or I only understand that on the surface level that time, and now I understand it on an embodied level. And so I think that's cool. So, well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, I'm gonna pop off. So thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for the invite.
Thanks for
Thank you, Sue.
coming.
Thank you.